my next task, having built up these decks, is to look at the staircases here. What I want to do is just blank them off on each side, so that as you look in from this angle here or through the opening here, what you see is some white sidewall either side of the staircase. And then when we've done that, we want to paint all of the inside of this black, which will just help blackened windows and if you peer in through these side windows here. So yeah, it'll just and paint all this black as well, but we need to sort that out first, so that's a job for a little bit of plastic card, I think. So we don't need to do anything particularly flash here. I just want to make sure that we see the right things when we look through. So just going to cut a little strip there like that. That should be sufficient, I would think, because we've got staircase coming down from the kit part as well here, which already has side walls, so we'll just continue with that. So we do 4 of those, and we can simply glue them into place. That's sort of job done, really. Okay, we can put this deck in now that we've painted that up, and we have it has to go right to the back of these points here, and it shouldn't slope down. Right now it looks like it's sloping down, but you've got to just go in and make sure that the lip is properly tucked in behind the duplex bulkhead, and that levels your deck. Like so. So we can put some glue on this now. Okay, that should be enough. Going in front edge down first. sure we're square. There we go. And then what I'm going to do, just for a little bit of added strength, is I'm just going to run some liquid glue in the sides, which is where we didn't put any glue. We've not built up the screens here, so we can do that quite easily at this point. There we go. And that completes our stern decks. Okay, we are back at the bow end of the ship, having spent quite a bit of time at the stern. With all of this in place, we are now ready to build up the front superstructure, and then we've got a deck area and the bridge to go across this bit here. Now, some of you will notice, if you look at reference pictures, in some pictures these two wings look a bit shorter. That's because as launched, which is how we're building this model, her bridge wasn't as wide as it is now. It was decided that they wanted to extend it just to improve the view. So that's why they look like they overhang these points more in more up-to-date photographs. So I think it was a fairly early alteration, to be honest. So what we are going to do is clean up these parts here and have a look at fit. Annoyingly, the gate nub is right on the join point of this part. So there's a little lip there. So you've got quite a little bit of work to get that flush and then take it down on this recess. Now that's a full length line, so I'm going to show you a quicker way of doing it. So rather than trying to get this below that line, we're actually just going to cut that bit of the line out and have done with it, because we don't need the full length of the line. So we'll just chop the whole gate out and pretend it was never there. Okay, so these are the parts that we need for the front of the ship superstructure. 3 parts. I think they're not going to fit particularly well. I think we're going to have a fair amount of clean up by the looks of them. But on the back particularly, there's a lot of ejector pin marks and stuff. Now obviously they're not going to get seen, but the material's quite thick, and when you look at the back of the windows you can see just how thick that is. So I actually want to thin that down a little bit, so I'm just going to use my rotary tool to do that. I like to use the rotary tool on its slowest setting just to avoid any plastic melt. So when you've finished thinning out your windows, you should end up with something that looks a bit like that. So we can see that it's thinned out at every window. I've just got to do the door. And then when you look through it at an angle, you're not going to see big, thick, heavy plastic, and that just looks a lot more realistic. And we can get in and glaze that okay, I think. So let's just do this door. So you can see all that thick plastic on that one, and you can see that we're a lot thinner now on that one. Right then, the fit of this part to the deck is great. Here there's a bit of an issue. We've got a little bit of a gap. I'm going to have to see if we can bring this in, but I don't think we can. So there'll be a little bit of filling required in this top half of the length of that depth of that part. So we've got that to sort out. But the fit of this part here next to it
leaves us with quite an ugly join line that before we paint this part we need to have completely removed, and I don't want to do that sat in situ there because obviously we've got one on each side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue this part together without gluing it to the deck whilst sat in situ, and then we'll glue the other part in the other side and take it out and clean it up separately, or at least that's the plan. So if we can get it lined up and glued in, we can always reinforce it, but I think what we're going to have to do is fill it at the back as well, so just for added strength. We'll have to be really careful this doesn't glue itself to the deck, so I'm ever so carefully missing the deck, and when I say the deck I don't mean the lower deck, I mean the blue deck behind it. We'll do the same on that side. Just hold that while it dries for a sec.
In designing the forward superstructure face of Queen Mary II, forefront in my mind was to avoid a slab-sided front, which I find particularly unattractive and which many modern passenger ships actually adopt. There wasn't to be any balconies because of the worry of or concerns to do with spray and, in extreme cases, waves from the Atlantic. So it had to be a smooth superstructure front, but what form should it take? Well, I also thought about the original Queen Mary built in 1936, and her forward superstructure is a stepped or terraced set of semicircular walkways. And I thought, well, it wouldn't be practical to have those walkways because of the wind and the like. But I wanted to incorporate that feeling. And I took inspiration from thinking back to when I was a school kid, going on holiday with my parents on the beach and building sandcastles, and the way the traditional bucket sandcastle would proudly stand in front of the oncoming sea, and as the water lapped around its base, it would collapse, forming a conical shape. And I thought, well, that conical shape blended into the forward superstructure would represent that first Queen Mary and give the ship an aerodynamic and unique forward superstructure front. And although I was very, very clear that I didn't want to have anything false on Queen Mary II, like false funnels and the like, what I did do is have black lines painted on that forward superstructure face, and that's a representation of the open walkways that the first Queen Mary had. So that's how the very distinctive forward face of the superstructure came about on Queen Mary II.
So before we start filling and cleaning this part up and getting it where we want it to be, there's quite a bit of smoothing work to be done on this. What I want to do is actually attach this deck to the top, which is going to add a little bit of strength to it, and particularly at the top where we're filling some gaps, we can fill that right against this this edge, so it just fits in this recess here, and it all really wants to be blended in so that it looks fairly seamless, which you can see we're way off that at the moment. So that means I've got to sort this deck out, and one of the issues we've got with this deck is that the little side pieces here and here sort of clip in, and the back piece that supports the balcony rooms at the end butts up against here, but it doesn't fit because of the angle of the deck bit here. You can see how it's sort of going out at an angle, it's flared rather than being straight, and as a result it doesn't fit. So we've got to sand these back a little bit. So that's my first job, sand them back, make sure this fits, and then we need to remove the raised deck caulking and get all the seam lines and bits off the side, which I've started doing, but it needs finishing, getting nice and flat and smooth in its own right. Then we can glue it on and start blending it all together. So I'm using my 220 Infinity stick on this job, and you can see if I do that, you can see it's just not straight. Yeah, so that now fits perfectly onto the main model. So now we know this fits at the deck because that's where we had it placed when we glued it together, so we can just simply put it into its recess and glue it in. And take this opportunity just to strengthen the bond at the back here, as where the little cutout is where the deck goes, and we didn't glue there. Okay, so we've got some clean up to do in the windows. You can see we've got a little bit of gap filling to do at the top, and also this part's a little lumpy in the mould, just here in this top area, so that all needs smoothing out. It's quite a complex shape actually. I'm sure the shipyard loved building this. I've managed to get a gluey fingerprint on. I want to just deal with that first. There we go, gone. Right, for this task we're going to use Mr. White putty. It's not my favourite putty, but it's a bit slower drying than my Humbrol putty, so gives me a little bit more time to play around with it. But I don't like how stringy it is. It's not, yeah, it's just a little bit too wet and watery for me. And it's not quite thick enough either, I don't think. So it causes you, you have to use more of it than the Humbrol putty or Squadron putty. Either of those products are better than this, I think. It also dries really, really hard, this one, so that's going to help with the strength of this. That's one of its plus points. Okay, we need to remove the raised deck caulking. It's a bit difficult to get in with a chisel, which is the method I've been using throughout the build so far. So I just want to scrub this flat really, and I'm going to use my power tool to do that. So I've got a little sanding stone attachment on, which is totally flat on this end, and that's going to allow me to just get in there and clean that up. So let's have a go. Okay, we just need to get in with some sanding paper, smooth it off and get rid of any raised bits, and we are done. Okay, we have left this, oh, it's nearly 24 hours, but it probably needed leaving at least 12 anyway. This is rock hard now, which is what we're looking for, because we're going to sand this smooth and shape this part here, because there shouldn't be any visible lip. We want it all to blend into one. So we'll start by just roughly taking it back in the first instance, which should also take back any unevenness in the plastic. There we go, it's starting to take shape now. So we've started here at the bottom, and we're leveling the plastic across here at the same time as we're taking this down, so that's good. It's all blending in nicely. But I can still see that the filler is proud of the plastic in places. But we are slowly getting it down, and then what we'll do is start going down the grits once we've blended it all in. It's quite a slow task, given how hard this filler is really. Right then, our front structure is ready for priming, and then we'll have another inspection, make sure it's okay, and then hopefully we'll be able to go straight to paint. We then have a wood deck to put in here, and then we can get in the back of here and glaze this. Now the glazing on this is clear, not black. It looks black on a lot of the pictures, but it's just that it's dark behind it. So what I'm going to do to emulate that is I'm going to paint behind this in a black, so everything that's visible through here will be black to help emulate that effect, but we will have the glazing clear, so it's true to life. So just got a little bit of tidy up to do on one or two windows. You can see, if I put my finger there, you can see they're not perfectly straight. So I've got one or two windows to clean up, but essentially that is almost done. I say almost, come back to that in a sec. So the next step is the bridge, and the bridge builds up straight on top of there. So this is our bridge floor, which sits on there like so. Then we've got our front windows, which go across there like that. Then we have the deck sits on top of that, and then we have the roof. Now on the real ship there's loads of equipment and bits and pieces in there, so it's a used space. It's not just aesthetic. So we do have some bits and pieces to put on the roof in terms of some photo etch, aerials, and that type of thing. We've also got a little bit of scratch building to do, but we'll do that after it's on and we're doing the etch in the bow area. So
We do have a little bit of scratch building to do in the bridge. It's missing some equipment in the wings here. And if you look underneath, you'll find there's a very small square. If the camera can pick that up, yeah. That is actually a glass floor. So we want to emulate that. So two ways we could do it. We could do what we've done on the ship's hull and paint it in gunmetal, so it looks like that. But when you look through the side windows, you can see that there is nothing there. And I think if we cut that out and glaze it, that'll look much better. So that's what we'll do. It's not a big job, I don't think. We've got quite a lot of filling to do on the surfaces there, that quite a bit of sink to do. And then what I want to do is glue these two parts together before installation. Now there's a couple of posts that run through the sort of support posts that run up through these corners here, and they actually go through the floor and down onto this deck, and they're quite visible when you look at pictures of the ship. There's two white little posts about here, and they're quite visible. So I want to put those in, so that'll be a little bit of brass rod most likely that we'll paint up. So there's a little bit to do there. Now the glazing on this is all clear. We've got to paint a stripe across the front. There is a decal for it, but there's no point putting a decal on. We'll paint it. The other thing that we've got to do is, when you look at pictures of it close up, there is some little foot railing that goes underneath all the windows, and that's so that people can get out there and clean the windows. So we're going to try and emulate that, and I'd like to install that into this before we install it onto the model. So at the very least, we need to pre-drill the holes for it. So we're going to be using some, I can't remember whether it was 1/600 or 1/700 railing. Let's have a go. It's 1/700 chain bar railing, but once painted up, you ain't really going to see that detail. The important thing is it has 3 rails on it, and there's 3 rungs on the step, so it's perfect. And my plan is to use that to go on the outside etch. It actually goes all the way around, so we'll have to do the back as well. But yeah, so that will be interesting. We're going to have to modify the etch a little bit. We've got to bend the etch. Yeah, that could be quite an interesting little challenge, but I'm determined to try and make that work. I suspect that because this is how these sort of things work, I suspect we're going to want to drill the holes just where that lip is for mounting the deck, because it would be just too nice if it was the other way around. What I think we might do is use the little lip on the inside, which is for positioning the deck, to keep the little holes straight and actually drill through from the back. So what we'll do is mark up the positions, then mark them on the bottom, and then drill through, and hopefully that will work. It's actually quite a thick plastic part when you look at it side on, so it's going to be a very fine drill trying to do quite a bit of work. The other thing we've got to do with this is, when you look at the side windows just there, you can't actually see through them, and that's because the mould is so deep. So we're going to have to trim that back and thin that down so that the side windows work as windows. So with all that said, let's stop talking and crack on with it. The first thing I want to deal with is there's quite a few raised ejector pin marks in there, so we're going to get rid of those first. And the fact that they're raised makes it nice and easy, really. Now, I'm fortunate that Stephen managed to get on the bridge and take plenty of photographs for me, so I have quite a few reference photographs, and we will share some of those as we are painting this up, so that you can see that I'm trying to get this to look right, which inevitably means a little bit of scratch building, and they have pot plants and all sorts of things in here, and I'm not saying that I'm going to do that, but we do want it to look right, and certainly the bulkhead at the back is wrong, so we need to think about that as well. So quite a bit of work to do in the bridge area if you wish. Certainly we don't have this big hole in the deck. That's would probably not pass health and safety these days, I would imagine. Okay, now all of this is green inside, different shades of green, that is, carpets and machinery. Next thing I think is to cut out that little square hole. So we're going to start by drilling a hole in it, and then we'll just square it up with a knife blade, I think. Okay, that will do for the drilly bit. I'll get my pointy knife. I don't usually use this one for scratch buildy tasks, but I also need my magnifying glasses. What we'll do is just whip in with our blade and get the excess out. Because it's a countersunk little rectangle, it's nice and easy. We can just go up to the pre-countersunk shape and use that. You've got to imagine that as they had the plans, Ravel didn't get this too far wrong. And there we have one glass floor waiting to be glazed. I'll get the other one done, and then we'll have a look at probably filling next job. I'm just going to use a little bit of Humbrol model filler for levelling up all this sink. The great thing about it is, with it being grey, it's easy to see against the white, which will make it easy to clean up. There we go, so that's those faces done, which are the faces that are going to be pointing at the window, so we can't ignore it. So this is our deck section that the roof of the bridge fits onto, and the fit's really nice actually. So this area becomes the ceiling in our bridge, and well, we've got this thick, I don't know what, but actually the bridge, when it goes in, the forward edge of the bridge is sitting here. So we've got this funny step in here which isn't on the actual ship, and as far as I can see is not doing anything structurally. So I'm going to sand that smooth because I want to paint that. It's a sort of darkish grey colour that we need to wring out of that. So I'm going to sand that smooth and see how we get on with that. There also appears to be a couple of holes, and I can't work out what they're for because it's getting completely covered. So most strange. But yeah, we're going to sand that smooth next job. Let's go electric. Great thing about Humbrol putty is it dries so very quickly. So we can just quickly whip that excess off. Okay. That is our bridge prepped. Our next thing is I want to backfill the deck in line with the back edge there, ready for a little bit of scratch build. So I've got a little bit of scrap plastic card here. What is that? It's not. Oh, is it? No, it's not quite wide enough, that one. use this one. So we're just going to hold that in place. It's already got one straight edge, so we can use that to line it up. And we'll just draw around it. Okay. I think I have found the right distance, just about. So okay, that now appears to plug my hole nicely, so we should be able to just chuck a bit of liquid poly in there and away we go. So let's have a try. Just glue it in from the back. Hold that for a sec.
Now, when you're designing something like Queen Mary 2, you need to have a bit of fun. And I had a bit of fun with the mast. Because you see here, the ship is at anchor. We're actually in Norway. And the Norwegian courtesy flag is hanging rather limp. Just so happens that the Kinnaird House flag and the other flag is flying. But you notice the red ensign there. Now, I can tell you something, as the flagship of the British Merchant Marine, that red ensign must never hang limp. And so I designed it in such a way that the air conditioning exhaust comes out the top of the mast, and that flag is always flying and displaying that she is the flagship of the British Merchant Marine. Looking down, as a ship under construction, we see the great breakwater that was inspired from the Normandy, and the superstructure front that is a huge strength member. But more than anything else, the next picture tells you that this is a liner. And it's that picture, because that pointed bow, designed to cut through the heaviest of weather, there's no other passenger ship or no other ship in the world that has that shape of bow now. And when you compare it to some other ships, you see the big difference, that the other ships in really rough weather would have to slow down, but this ship can keep going on. And of course, the real challenge, thinking back to the old Queens and the class demarcation, was to ensure that everybody on this Queen could experience the grand public spaces that the first class enjoyed all those years ago. And I hoped that by giving the interior designers spaces like this room, the Britannia restaurant, the Queen's room, and illuminations, that we could certainly achieve that. And I think it's been a stunning job actually building those public rooms out of the spaces that I was able to provide. And the iconic rooms on here, such as the Commodore Club and the chart room that really echoes the old Queen Elizabeth's architecture, and our atrium, and of course the great illuminations, the first ship to have a planetarium at sea, still by far the largest planetarium, and a wonderful cinema and lecture hall. And the largest ballroom afloat with the largest dance floor, and of course the room we're in now, seating 1,300 under normal conditions, with something like $15 million worth of entertainment equipment built into this room. Things that you can't see, like a revolving stage, an orchestra pit, and a fly tower there. All that's built into this ship to enable her to offer the best of entertainment.
Okay, my next task is to just paint this area in black so that when we look through the forward-facing windows on this, we can't see anything that we don't want to see, basically. So That's a nice quick job really, but needs to be done. Something quite therapeutic about brush painting, I think. I really need a system. I can never remember whether I've pre-thinned my Tamiya paints or not. I really need a system to mark them up. This looks like it has been pre-thinned to me. Right, I'll get this painted up and show you what it looks like when it's done. I'm going to paint the inside of this black as well for exactly the same reason. So no matter what angle someone comes and looks at this, they're not going to see any white plastic or anything like that. So we're going to use 70833 German camouflage bright green for most of what's in here, and then we'll do a little bit of altering the colour of it for the panels and various things, but they're all basically a variation of this green, starting with the carpet, which we're just going to use as the straight green as our base. On the inside, the bridge windows from the bottom of the window up is all green also. So we'll paint that in now. I know we've not done the modification to this strut here, but we can always touch it up. But whilst we've got the paint out and we're waiting for the first coat on the floor to dry, we can do that. So before we can paint the front face of the forward superstructure, we do have to deal with this area here. It's very, very lumpy. Each one of these uprights is thicker than the gap that spans between them. So it just looks wrong. And it's actually really difficult to get in there with a sanding stick without possibly damaging that, and can't get the angle in. So I'm using this sanding tool. So this is the Proxon PS13 pen sander, and the actual tool itself isn't expensive. It's only about £27–28, but the transformer is sold separately. So if you've not got a 12-volt transformer, you'll need to get one of those, and that's another £40 or so. But it's really handy. There's lots of, it comes with lots of different shaped end tools, and you get pre-cut sanding pads of different grades, and it's really handy for this sort of work where you need to get in. So let me show you this in action. So I can get in really easily, and it's doing all the hard work really. All I have to do is hold it in place. And it's making really short work of this job actually. So I'll crack on and finish this and get back to you when it's done.
Okay, interior of the bridge. What we need to do is look at one or two minor modifications, things that are going to be visible through what are ultimately fairly small windows. So as you look through these windows, you are going to see definitely the controls panels, and there is a set of control panels missing on each wing, so we need to put those in. Now when you look at some photographs, there is another set of control panels that appears to be about halfway along the wing, so be careful of that, because in your model the actual position is roughly next to that little rectangular opening that I've made. So if you've not opened it, you're going to have to get your bearings from the underside, because if you remember, I've opened this up because that is clear and needs to be glazed. So as the ship was launched, which is the model we're building, the controls are right next to that, because the idea was the person using the controls could look down through that glass floor and see what they were doing. Now after launch, it was considered that the wings were possibly a bit too short, and they were then extended. So when you look at later photos of the Queen Mary 2, and indeed most photographs of the Queen Mary 2, you'll see she's got longer wings, and that's what makes it look like the controls are further up the wing. But we need to put a set in that emulates what we've got there right next to that on each side. So that's what I'm going to do with this plastic strip. It's going to have to be painted the same colour as that, so we need to do it before we get to painting the control panels. So first thing I want to do is just square off the end of my rod here. So we'll just put it on the grid. Now if you're one of those people who gets a little frustrated at the fact that you seem to cut straight and get an angle, the reason that happens is because you're not looking at the top of your knife. If you look at the side of your blade, you lean over and your hand moves over, and that's why you cut at an angle. So this is actually something I learned as a butcher. So this is a tip from cutting steaks. But if you look at the top of your knife edge, you'll always cut straight down. So there's a little tip. Okay, so we have straightened the edge here. So we're now, this control panel is slightly smaller than the others. So what we'll do is we'll decide on a length, which is going to be that, and we'll mark it. And then we'll start by cutting two of those lengths. So the mark that I've made with my knife, we can now line up with the grid. I'm looking at the top of my knife again. There we go. We need to make a second one. So again, we'll get that square, Get that out of the way. Okay, so that's the two base sections for our unit. So next thing we need to do is the little top section, the angled bit. So I'm going to cut another two to the same length. Well, actually, I'm not going to cut them. I'm just going to mark them out to start with. What we'll do is we'll get a file and we'll shape it on the rod and then cut it to length. Right, I think that is looking okay in terms of an angle. So what I'm going to do is just cut the whole thing off and then we'll trim it to size. I'm just test fitting this deck, something that I always do beforehand, and it's quite tight fitting, and unfortunately they've in their wisdom decided that they would make it fit around the plastic part, and of course that's exactly what they should do, but because the plastic part's wrong and modified, I've now got a very crazy shaped bit of deck edging, but won't really be seen once we've got the top on this section here. But what I am finding is that the deck doesn't fit here on this wing. It's slightly too long and gathering up, so we will have to trim it, otherwise this isn't going to lay flat. So I'm going to take the margin, trim the margin plank down a little bit at a time until it fits, which is a bit of a pain. But otherwise, what if we don't do that, what might happen is at some point it'll bubble up and we'll have a section of deck lift somewhere. So we don't want that. Right now, everything else seems to fit flat. It's just that little edge there, you can see it wanting to force its way up. So we'll have a little go at trimming that, I think. So best way to do that is get yourself a nice sharp knife and a steel rule. Okay, I am going to put my magnifying glasses on for this and make sure that we are getting this nice and straight. As I look at this, the margin plank looks to be slightly thicker at this end than that end, so my first play is going to be to straighten up a little bit. Now obviously there is an angle to to the wing, it's not straight. It does flare out as the shape of the deck. So I just want to make sure that it's not oversized in any way. So I'm going to just trim a little bit off in a wedge shape and see what happens. And we might have to then straighten it up if it fits at one end and not at the other. But my gut feel is it's just slightly oversized at one end. Okay, so we've taken literally a hair's worth off, and that's how we will do it. We'll make it fit, because if we're not careful, we'll end up with a little bit of a gap, which again wouldn't be a massive problem, but I'd rather it all looked okay, really. So if we put that in, fitting at the other end, it lays perfectly flat on the other wing. It's not a problem at all. And you can see that it's wanting to force the deck up because it's still too tight, although it's fitting better at the front than it was. Yeah, still a little bit too long. Okay, and it is just a case of keep dry fitting. So we put it down on that side, follow it round. There we go. There we go. That is fitting nicely now, nice and flat, not pushing the deck up. Yeah, okay, so I think we just need to give this a satin varnish and let that dry, and then we're ready for putting the deck in. With this modification we need to make to the window struts here, you can see this one, because it's so thick, it's blocking out the side window. Side on, you just see the strut. And we need to thin that back because you can see out of the side window on the real ship. Okay, so what we're going to do is just cut down. Sorry, you're in my way. And then we'll trim it down at an angle, making it slightly thinner as we go. And then we can square that off a little bit. So that's better already, I think. The test is in visibility. So as we look through there, we've got better visibility, but it still looks very thick. So I'm actually going to work from the outside now because the external aesthetic is more important to us. Okay, so I'm going to do the other one, then we're going to paint this black, and then we're going to seal it all with a satin varnish, and then we're going to have a look at the walkways that need to go along the front.